All set? Okay, great. Well, by my clock, it's 7, and we will call to order this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Albany Planning and Zoning Commission for Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. And I'll note that all commissioners are present and read the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lishan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. Okay, that takes care of items 1 and 2 on the agenda. Item 3 is ex parte communication. Do any of the commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose? I'm seeing head shakes all around, and myself included, nothing to disclose. We'll move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is the consent calendar. Usually moved and enacted by one motion, unless someone wants to poll an item for discussion, and I would like to poll item 4.2. Would any commissioners like to poll item 4.1? Minutes? Okay. All right. Seeing none, let's since this can be enacted in one motion, let's move to 4.2, and I just had a question for my fellow commissioners on 4.2. I don't see a big issue with this application at all, but I do know that the FAR for this project has increased to where exceptional design standards should be applied. And the only thing that bugged me about the design was that they're adding on to the left-hand side of the front elevation and moving the roof peak over to the side. Won't be centered over the bay window anymore. And so it looked a little odd to me, but the other elevations look just fine and are consistent with the existing elevations. So I just thought I would poll my fellow commissioners to see if they had any issues with this design.
I'm happy to jump in. I don't have any concerns about that. I didn't have any issue with the change in roof form or the horizontal side addition. The only thing I was going to comment on this, and I was going to make a motion on the consent calendar to do this with conditions, is just, as you noted, since this is a increased FAR design review, they are proposing vinyl windows right now throughout, which is not encouraged as part of the residential design guidelines. So I was fine with the project just with that condition of approval, asking the windows to either be wood or an aluminum clad wood window consistent with the craftsman style, architectural style. But otherwise, I don't have any change to the change in roof form or the horizontal side addition.
Thank you for being a champion of windows. I appreciate that, and I am upset that I missed that myself. Any comments from other commissioners on this application?
Could we see the elevations? Is that possible to bring them up for a minute?
It's the front elevation?
That's the proposed elevation. In the current building, the peak of the roof is right over the bay window, centered over the bay window, okay. And it's moved over a little bit because they've expanded to the left there.
Yeah, well, okay, if I could just comment, it doesn't bother me. I think it's still balanced enough with the other window on the other side and the entryway on the other side. I think it's fine.
Okay.
At least in my opinion.
Okay. No other comments? Commissioner Moman? Nothing? Okay.
There are no other comments. I'm happy to make a motion to move the consent calendar with the addition of changing the windows from vinyl to either an aluminum clad or a wood window.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Hudson?
Aye.
Commissioner McLeod?
Aye.
Commissioner Momin?
Yes.
And Commissioner Wadi?
Aye.
And I vote yes as well. So that passes, and if you're here for that application, it is approved, and congratulations. I see a question from the audience, but if it can be answered by staff.
We did send in comments about this project.
Oh, I am so sorry. I did not open public comment for this. That is my error, and apologies. So I would invite you to come and give public comment now. And we can take a revote if necessary. My apologies.
I'm Judith Carey and my husband Van, and we live next door at 624. We have lived there for over 40 years, so we're rather familiar with the house next door. Our biggest concerns concern the possibility of lead paint and also asbestos on the north side of the building. We hope that you will insist that it be tested to see if there is asbestos on this particular vent pipe, and also to test the paint as well. We grow fruits and vegetables in our backyard, and I really don't want our yard contaminated with this, and I don't want workers exposed to it as well. So, the other comment we wanted to say was talk about the dust and debris control. We would like to see some sort of a barrier put up that's as high as the area that's going to be demolished. Our patio sits directly on the property line, and we consider that an extension of our living space. It's directly below the second floor and first floor portion of the house that's going to be demolished. So we would like to have some sort of barrier to prevent that sort of stuff from the dust and debris from entering our property. And extend it beyond just the specific work area, extend it beyond so that we don't get it in our backyard where our fruits and vegetables are. And then the last thing, just ask that nothing no tools or anything be attached to or leaned against the fence between the two properties. We just don't want the fence damaged.
And you sent in a letter to the commission as well, correct?
I did, yes.
Thank you.
But I did want to notice that we are really concerned about the asbestos and the lead paint. You know, when we moved into our house 40 years ago, we had to deal with the asbestos and had to have it removed properly, so it's,
Yeah.
I think, a possibility that it's there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your comments. And is anyone else in the audience here to speak on this project? And apologies for rushing so far ahead. For the audience online, now would be the time to raise your hand if you have any comments on this application. Do you see any
Chair
hands?
Pilch, I'm not seeing any hands raised online.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll bring it back to the commission. I'll just note that I believe there are standards for handling all the issues that were specified in your letter that would be enforced by the building department. And I don't know if maybe not specifically to everything you said, but certainly the handling of asbestos and lead paint, there are already standards. And staff, would you like to add any more to that?
I'll respond to your email and make sure that we get connected so you understand the next step of the process is a building permit. And that's where we would typically work out some of these details. And Chair Pilch, you're correct. It's both asbestos and lead paint are pretty heavily regulated, and contractors are responsible for that compliance.
Right. And I would encourage you to be in touch with the owners of the home as well as the contractors who eventually show up and make sure they understand your concerns as well. And so thank you.
Yeah,
Back
just
to the commissioner.
respond,
Yes.
asbestos abatement must be done by licensed, qualified asbestos abatement contractors. So they should be out there in their white suits and all that, doing all the proper precautions. Lead paint anybody doing remodeling, any contractor is supposed to have lead certified training, according to the EPA, painters, et cetera. And I think for these older houses, I think we have to assume anything older than 1978 has lead paint. So it is a contractor's duty to make sure that all work is done in a lead-safe manner. And that's regulated by the EPA. Regarding dust abatement, that's a matter of also, I mean, it's just good practice for people doing remodeling not to allow dust, and it's something where they could put up, I've seen it on some places, they put up some posts and some filter type of fabric to help keep dust down, but yeah, I mean, I think that's a courtesy that the contractor could extend, and that would be, again, in communication with your neighbor and your neighbor's contractor, I think would be important. And lastly, about the fence, I think that's also a communication issue with the contractor and the neighbor. Technically, they can put their materials and tools anywhere they want on their property, but if it's leaning on the fence, then it's, we don't want anybody to have to deal with a damaged fence. So, but also, it would be the contractor's duty to repair any damage to a fence if it does occur. So it's also in their best interest to not damage neighbor property, so, or common property, and maybe in this case. So that's all I would say for these things. And having said that, then I would say it doesn't change my vote in terms of the design and approval. So I don't know if we need to revote or not, but I'll let
I was just about to
Chair.
ask, and I wanted to see if there any other commissioners wanted to make any more comments at this time.
I was just going to add that I failed to realize that there was a special condition of approval that I didn't see on page 9 that addressed the vinyl window issue. So staff was already on it. I just didn't see that on the plans. So
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you, staff.
yeah.
And thank you, Commissioner Waddy.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to just remake that motion now that we've gone through public comment to approve the consent calendar as proposed then.
Okay, we can just make another formal vote just to make sure that we've done this properly. So we have a motion, and would you?
I'll second.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll do the roll call vote again. I'll do it from the opposite side. Commissioner Waddy?
Aye.
Commissioner Moman?
Yes.
Commissioner McLeod?
Aye.
Commissioner Hudson?
Aye.
And I vote yes as well. And once again, apologies for rushing ahead, but thank you for attending. And there you've got staff's contact information. So yeah, do reach out to staff with any issues at all. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And we will move on then to item 5, which is announcements and communications. I think you have an no, this is your item.
At the end, I've got a kind of a specific agenda item for giving you an update on some of the things that we're working on.
Oh, yeah.
Announcements are typically just real quick things, not a lot of back and forth.
Okay.
So I separated the two. I don't have any.
Thank you for that clarification, because I do remember seeing this item 8, and I thought, oh, wait a minute, I know he's going to speak at some point. Okay.
Yeah.
So are there any quick announcements from any commissioners or staff at this time? No. Seeing none, we'll move on to public comments, and this is for any member of the public wishing to address the commission on items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone from the audience who wants to speak on an item not on the agenda? No one in the audience. Anyone online raising their hands?
No one online.
For item 6, okay. Then we will close that item and move to item 7, which is our discussion and possible action on matters relating to the following items. And the first one is item 7.1, planning application PA 23-009, design review for first floor addition and major remodel at 520 Pomona Avenue. And do you have a staff report?
Yes, I have a brief staff report, and the project architect is here with us this evening. All right, this is a planning application for design review at 520 Pomona Avenue. The property is a 3,300 square foot lot with a 3-bedroom, 2-bath residence at 1,977 square feet. The request is for a design review for a second-story addition. The result will be a 4-bedroom, 3-bath home totaling 1,812 square feet, height of approximately a little less than 24 feet, and a floor area ratio proposed at 42%. This is an item that you discussed at your March 23rd commission meeting and provided some feedback on the design at that time. The two main points are seeking more clarity and detail in the plans and suggesting review of the design guidelines, the city's design guidelines, to incorporate more varied building materials and differing facade plane depths. At the time, the project architect was unexpectedly unable to attend, so it was continued at that time by the commission. This is a site plan showing the area of addition. It's in the back of the residence. We have no new correspondence on this application, to my knowledge, at this time, but we did receive correspondence when it was originally noticed, so I wanted to provide that. And to note that we're recommending approval with a special condition as noted. Be happy to answer any questions, and as I mentioned, the project architect is here as well to provide any additional details and respond to your questions.
Okay, would the architect like to make any brief comments? Oh, you're the architect. Yes, please go ahead.
The only thing I would clarify is that the addition is taking over what is now an existing deck, and then we're raising the house about 9 inches over what the maximum was before, so that the lower floor could actually be a usable space. And then we're shuffling the inside and doing a new layout on the inside that works for the owners who have lived there for a little bit already. And then the only other thing I would say is that we took your comments to heart. I apologize that I missed the meeting last time. And what we tried to do is, in line with the contemporary style that the owners wanted, we added some relief. We recessed the front entry. We added some material change to the front entry, and we added a window box on the second floor to kind of add some relief. And one of the reasons I'm working on this project is because I did 2 other projects in Albany in the last couple of years that the clients found me from those projects, and they have a lot of similarity to what we're doing design-wise for this project. And they were approved. One of them went to this commission, but not for the design, because it had a storied history where there was a lot of illegal things that were done, and we had to pull some square footage off. And the other one was approved without us having to come to this meeting. So I'm here to answer any other questions you have. Oh, one other thing is, one of the comments that came back is that, or the owners were feeling like there was some pushback that the look of the place that we're proposing didn't quite match with the neighborhood. I did a little canvassing of the neighborhood. There isn't really a unifying theme on that neighborhood. There is some Mediterranean style, which is what this started with, sort of an eclectic Mediterranean style, but there's lots of different kind of style on this in the neighborhood. And one of the houses that was approved that they liked is actually 1 block over on Pomona that has a very similar style. So I would say that's also in the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you for those comments. So at this time, I'd like to invite the commission to ask questions of staff or the architect. Does any commissioner have a question or questions? I'm not seeing any. Commissioner Hudson, no? Okay.
I was just also looking at the site again, because we looked at it before, and one of the things I brought up then was how it didn't seem to blend with the neighborhood. And I understand that 2 of the recently constructed buildings, houses in Albany, have inspired the people who live there and you to do what you're doing. To me, I mean, I don't have a practiced eye perhaps, but it still doesn't seem to blend in. But other than that, it's a rather interesting house.
Okay, thank you for that. And seeing no other questions, and I don't have any questions at this time, thank you. We'll see if there's any member of the public who wants to comment on this item. Anyone in the audience, or did anyone raise their hand on the line?
No hands being raised online.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. We'll close the public hearing, and we'll bring this back to the commission then for comments and motion. Would anyone like to make some more comments? Commissioner Momin?
Thank you for the revised design. I think it's a big improvement from your previous version. I think it is looking authentically contemporary modern now. And the changes that you have done in, just small changes in the roof, like reducing the projection of the eaves, I think makes it look more so. And the new fenestration style, I think, is also a good improvement from your previous. Basically, I also agree with you that the neighborhood doesn't have like a unifying character in terms of architecture. The house had a nice character in some way, but this design could be also a unique improvement now. And I also like the changes you did to the entrance, recessing it back, and also changing the finish of the recess, along with the projected window above that on level 2. I think creates a nice character on the front now. So I think it's good improvement, and I'm happy to support it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wadi?
Sure, same. I wanted to echo many of Commissioner Momin's comments. I think the revisions were just nuanced enough and sort of hit the mark on being able to have this building in its totality read as a contemporary architectural style. I similarly agree. I think it's a really mixed character block. And I'm a big proponent that, either you should do an addition that's sort of sensitive to existing architecture and respect the existing house's architecture, or you should do something new. And I think to me, it's more about respecting the proportions and massing of the neighborhood and not trying to be matchy-matchy with, picking out individual architectural features or, a trim piece from this house and an, awning from this house. Like that doesn't, to me, make for quality architecture. So I would rather the building speak to itself, but look to more of those proportions of the neighborhood. I appreciate some of the inspiration. I'm not 100% convinced that the 506 from Pomona is the one that I would want to lean towards. I think there's some sort of incongruities with the design guidelines with the type of trim that's used there and some of those things. But nonetheless, that's not about this project. I think the one on Portland is a great example. And again, I think you just hit the mark between really strong changes in plane, which I think, again, with contemporary architecture, sometimes we think that line is of where you can sort of hit or miss on executing contemporary architecture is the change in plane. And sort of you've done that, I think, with the entryway and with the window box. So all in all, I'm supportive of the project and would be happy to make a motion to move after my fellow commissioners are done discussing.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner McLeod?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. I think the changes have been good. I think the previous plans suffered a little bit from overly graphic lines that kind of were hard to read for most people, and kind of graying it out a little bit gives it more of a sense of, yes, it's going to be a flatter plane and more of a consistent surface. So, I think the presentation drawings really help. It really helps us understand, it helps neighbors, and it helps, everybody get on board, really. So, I would encourage more or better presentation drawings, in general, for applicants. And having said that, I do appreciate the examples you gave us. The 1152 Portland, I think, would be a good model in the sense of, kind of how it's going to look. You're sort of a mix of some traditional detailing a little bit with the board and batten, and then more modern. So, I think, I think it will be fine. And I'm, less concerned about the side elevations in the rear, as, we've noted and on a number of applications, that it's more the front facade, and I do like the more contemporary look there. And, with some nice paving going up to the front, as in some of the examples, I think it would be a nice house, a nice addition to the neighborhood. And I'm entirely supportive of changing the look of the house to suit your needs and tastes. There's no one dominant style in Albany, and nothing on your block is one dominant style either, and the existing house is kind of a hodgepodge of funny little details in front. So seeing that change is fine with me. So having said that, I'm happy to support the project.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, okay, Hudson, no more comments. Yeah, I think I can agree with my fellow commissioners about this project. And actually, I should have asked a question earlier, and I'll ask for the aid of Commissioner Waddy as well to talk a little bit about the windows. I see that they're called out as Marvin fiberglass. Is that
It'll be a fiberglass clad.
fiberglass clad? Okay, instead of an aluminum clad, it's fiberglass clad. Okay, got it. So,
Not vinyl. I'm with you on vinyl.
yeah, okay.
My client's out of vinyl.
Okay, great. And so the windows, and then the with designs like this where there's a large, expanses of flat wall, sometimes if the windows aren't done well or placed well, they can be, or they're placed flat against that expanse that can look not so good. So I'm not able to read this as to how exactly are the windows placed. Are they inset? Or can you tell me a little bit more about whether the windows are inset or outset, and the trim?
The kind of window we're going to get will have at least a 1-inch recess, and then there'll be a trim around it.
Okay.
That'll match the thickness of the batten, which is about 1.5 inches. So overall, it'll end up being about 2 inches, 2.5 inches recessed, the windows themselves.
Okay, great. And the architects on the commission feel that that's a decent treatment for the windows. I'm looking at Commissioner McLeod and/or.
Well, it's a requirement that the windows are recessed the glass plane is recessed 2 inches from the surface of the wall plane. And whether the trim constitutes that piece is not part of it, is my understanding. So, and these fiberglass windows, they're excellent windows, but the glass is kind of close to the front. It's not recessed in the frame that much. So I think to really hit the letter of the ordinance, you would have to recess that window a little bit more.
We show a detail on A8.1. You're right, we're actually showing it as 2 inches, but that includes the trim piece.
Well, I think my understanding is that it's from the wall plane and not the trim.
Yeah, condition of approval number 21 says the building permit plans are required to include a window detail that shows the window shall be recessed approximately 2 inches from the face of the building to provide adequate shade and shadow to promote visual relief. So that's currently in the approval before us right now.
Right. So that's actually going to be a building permit application
We'll change that
issue.
detail.
And I think taking the other comments about the kind of the depth of the windows and all that, I think it helps the design. It gives the facade a little more relief.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Right.
that was. I mean, I think the design is fine, and I support diversity in design actually in the city. I echo your comments, Commissioner McLeod, about that. There's not one design on my block. You made me think about on my block. I have kind of a faux Tudor house, but there's also some salt boxes on the block and all kinds of whimsical little designs. So I think a modern design fits in just fine with all those other designs. So I would be, and given that we've now pointed out to you the letter of the what's the word I'm looking
Letter of
for?
the law.
Letter of the law, the requirements. I think that'll be a good look too. That was my only concern about the windows being too flat against the walls. So also in support. And I think Commissioner Wadi wanted to make a motion.
Sure, happy to make a motion to approve this application as proposed.
Second.
And, okay, we have a second from Commissioner Moman. And any further discussion? Otherwise, I'll poll the commission. Commissioner Wadi?
Aye.
Commissioner Moman?
Yes.
Commissioner McLeod?
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson? Abstain.
Abstain.
Okay, great. And I vote yes. So we have 4 yeses and 1 abstention, so that passes. And thank you. I don't know if this project has any story poles up, but those need to remain up if there are there for the appeal period, which is 14 days. So, and thank you very much for coming. And I should have noted the appeal period as well on the first application that we approved, which is also 14 days. And I'm not, and if any story poles are on that application, they need to remain up during that period.
We'll remind them about that in the morning.
Thank you very much, staff, director. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 7.2. This is a different item, the study session on amendments to the transportation element of the general plan, et cetera. And,
That's fine.
and I'll hand it back over to staff.
Okay, thank you. This is, I think, a kind of an interim check-in with you. You had a very productive, lengthy discussion at your last meeting on the proposed changes to the parking regulations, inspired initially by changes in state law, but also looking at some of our other policies and programs. Gene Iceberg and I kind of talked after, debriefed afterwards, and we recognized that, as has been the case in other planning efforts, sometimes in your discussions, 1 or 2 of you will raise an important issue and express an opinion about it, and there's not necessarily any discussion from all of you, and we can kind of assume there was concurrence, but we don't want to necessarily do that without having a chance to check in with you. So as we did most recently with the preparation of the specific plan, we're kind of at the point, if we can get your collective concurrence on some of the main points, the draft that we'll bring back to you at a meeting in the near future, I think will be closer, if not right on the mark, to what you're expecting to see, and something that you'd be prepared to hopefully make a recommendation on. So let me share my screen. So again, just for people who might be listening for the first time, just a little bit of context. Assembly Bill 2097 was passed last year by the state legislature and signed by the governor. It requires all cities to not impose any parking requirements on nearly all types of uses. There's some exceptions, but none really applicable to Albany. We have no parking regulations within a half mile of a major transit stop. In Albany, that consists of a little, where within a half, part of the city is within a half mile of the El Cerrito BART station, and then San Pablo and Solano is a major transit stop because of the intersection of the 72 and the 18, and then San Pablo and Monroe is a major stop because of the intersection of the 72 and the 52. So those half-mile radiuses cover a large majority, but not the entire city. And as a result, we started this by exploring the commission's interest in expanding AB 2097 to the entire city, just to treat everybody equally. I do have one piece of new information to share with you that we didn't incorporate in our last presentation, which is there is a policy being developed by the Association of Bay Area Governments to, they're calling it their transit-oriented communities policy, that will be linked to, there will be a requirement to be eligible for certain types of grant programs. And basically what this is saying is that for any projects that are within a half a mile of, residential projects within a half a mile of the El Cerrito BART station, the maximum parking that would be allowed in order to be eligible for grants would be half a space per unit. And then there's also a requirement for new commercial development of 1.6 spaces per 1,000 square feet. And so we would recommend, although this is not a final policy yet, it is soon to be, in the next few months, will be adopted by ABAG. And in order to maintain our eligibility for various types of grants, I think it would be best to try to comply with this policy if at all possible. So that may modify a little bit of some of the discussion you had last time. Our staff report also included some information about some of the recent parking ratios for projects in Albany. And then the main thing, as I mentioned, is kind of just checking in on some of these, and I'll expand this screen, I'm sorry. Making sure that we're hitting the main issues correctly, that we have the main themes of the discussion you had correctly, and that you have a majority of you decide what you want to see us to bring back to you. So ideally, if we could go through these briefly, one by one. If you need to have a little bit of a discussion about it, great. If it's obvious, you don't need to have that for our benefit. It's up to you whether you want to go into a lengthy discussion among yourselves. And then we would bring back to you. So none of this is binding on anyone. You can change your mind if you see the ordinance and you think, oh, I didn't really like that after all. But it just helps us bring back to you an ordinance that is close to what you want to see.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, thank you. Well, so before we go through these one by one, I'll just see if any commissioners have any general questions about what we're doing or the process or anything like that. Not seeing any, and I don't have any either. So,
I have one.
yes.
I don't know if this is germane to today, but I was looking at the transportation element, and I noticed that the data is from 2014-15, and we have so much that's happened since then. And I'm just curious about, of course, a lot of things are driving the transportation element. It's supposed to go until 2035, I believe. And how that's being factored in the new events of the last few years, and also the hemorrhage of people leaving the Bay Area, how that's being factored into the importance of this particular step. And again, I want to come back to the question of how are we handling it for people who are disabled, aged, or families with children in limiting the amount of parking, because I must say, at Pierce Street, entering Marin or Buchanan, there is no parking. That was one of the housing things that we approved recently. Somebody wanted an addition or a remodel, and I went over there trying to find a place to park so I could look at the house. And there are a lot of places where street parking, it just doesn't work. And so off-street parking for some kind of accommodation for a chunk of the population, families. We know there are a large chunk of people living in Albany who have families. They come here because of the school district. And there are, on the other side of that, the aging population and maybe disabled population. So that was in the minutes from last time. I'm just bringing it up again because I think it's important if we're basing a lot of these decisions, not just because they're handed down by ABAG with strings attached, you can't get grants. I'm wondering if we're looking at it from the point of view that each community is unique and it's addressing its issues. One part of Sonoma County, for example, Cazadero, is not one that's going to be the same as another city in Sonoma like Santa Rosa. And we are also different, as we know. The texture of our city is different than Berkeley, Oakland, and others in Alameda County. And yet we're being treated kind of as the same. And I'm wondering if this bill is being applied and adopted because we have to in order to get grant money. Some flexibility needs to be built in so that if this doesn't work, the transportation doesn't meet our needs. Right now it's 15 minutes during rush hour on Solano for bus line 18, but it may be 20 minutes after a certain time. It doesn't run past midnight. It starts at 4:55. I mean, that may not meet everybody's needs, especially if you have to get to the hospital. Another example. So, I mean, I have questions because we're folding in information from the transportation element in our decision-making that was included as part of the attachments. So I spent some time looking at that. I also want to know what there's current information on bike and auto traffic. Again, the table on table 43 is from 2014, making projections that bike traffic will go from 25% to 33% in 2040. But have we done any tally to see on the main corridors of traffic in Albany, what is the car and bicycle traffic? And if you have transportation on Solano that's already taken over by buses, and you see the parkettes, like at Cornell and Solano, where a bus stops and nobody can get past them, and it backs up the traffic, how are you going to get a bike lane in there? You know, there are several types of bike lanes potential, right? You've got the possibility of class 3 working, share the road, but that's not enough. We have enough accidents on Solano with bicycles and cars, and how are we going to fit another lane in when they have already dedicated room for vehicle traffic? So those are some of my questions. Is that too much? Oh, sorry.
Okay. Those sounds like more like policy questions for the commissioners to debate, or rather than questions for staff to answer, correct?
You're probably right.
Okay. Thank you. Any other general questions or comments before we dive in? I could,
To go to
I'm-
public comment?
what's that?
Public comment?
Oh, yeah, we do want to go to public comment at some point, but
Or you have?
yeah, no, I didn't have a question, so I was going to respond to Commissioner Hudson, but yeah, that's a good idea. Why don't we go ahead and see if there's public comment first? Anyone in the room? Nope. Anyone online raising? If this is the time to comment on this item, raise your hand if you have joined the discussion online.
We do have a hand raised
Please go
online. Peter Campbell, please go ahead.
Yes, I didn't have a chance to really research my thought or my question. I know there's an ordinance, I believe there's an ordinance in the works that will require a certain amount of electric vehicle parking in residential properties. And I didn't have a chance to research it and find out exactly what that is. But I'm just concerned that whatever these parking requirements are jibe properly with the requirements for electric charging within a building. And that's my only comment at this point, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else online wanting to comment? Any more hands raised?
No, I'm not seeing any more hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Director. I'll close the public comment then and bring it back to the commission. Would you care to answer that question about the how the electric vehicle requirements would jibe with the parking requirements, or how they would? I believe you would just overlay them on top of whatever parking is proposed. It's a certain percentage.
It's a certain percentage. I was just going to try to make sure I get the number right. Give me a moment to double check that I give the commission the right information, but it would be, if it's some percentage, if it's theoretically 25%, then 4 parking spaces are required, then 1 would be a charged EV charger space, and the other 3 would be conventional spaces.
That's right. And if it was an 8-unit building, it looks like in this proposal here, there'd be a maximum of 4 spaces, and then, as you said, if it's 25%, then 1 space would have to be electric. So I think that would be an overlay on top of the total number of spaces, is my understanding. But Director, if you have any more clarification, you can come back to us later with that as well. Okay, so we'll close the public comment. I guess I could say I guess I have a lot of different answers to your questions, Commissioner Hudson. And just to very briefly summarize, I think this is the direction of urban planning, is to accommodate or encourage mode shift and encourage those who haven't considered other modes to use them. Granted, there are people who need cars, but in some instances, such as the elderly, as you pointed out, there'll be a point at which they won't be able to use a car as well. So in the case of the seniors, that's kind of a wash there. But I do see. I do understand the need for those who need a vehicle for ADA access. There are other modes, such as human-powered vehicles or electric-powered vehicles or scooters that can also accommodate those with disabilities. So it doesn't always have to be a car to accommodate in ADA someone with a disability, but it can be another type of vehicle that could accommodate that person. And I would say that these changes are in line, I think, with what the region is doing in terms of parking requirements, recognizing that requiring a lot of housing, or excuse me, requiring a lot of parking means that you are also removing the ability to build the housing. Parking will displace the housing. So that's part of it. And then finally, I'll just say that there's a new book that either is coming out or just came out, just called Paving Paradise, something like that. The author's been interviewed on National Public Radio recently. That talks a lot about how the providing of parking initiates this vicious cycle of then having to provide for all the other infrastructure, which is very significant and expensive, to accommodate the cars that need the parking. And it encourages sprawl development and discourages compact, dense growth. And I guess I'll stop there because we could have this long discussion about that, but I did want to just, since you brought it up, I wanted to say a few words about that. Any other commissioners?
Well, just a few comments, I guess.
Okay, general
You know,
comments.
ADA requirements will still be there. And in general, I think what we are looking for is kind of a mode shift in response to climate change, in response to overly congested cities, in response to huge commute times, because we haven't been able to build enough housing here. And one of the factors limiting that has been parking requirements. It makes units more expensive. It takes up space that could be used for housing. So it's also an equity issue. And even if we go to zero minimums, it doesn't mean there's zero parking. There will still be parking. You know, if we go to a 0.5 max, there will still be parking, and it will probably be at 0.5. And that will provide parking for those who need it, in theory. And I've read studies that do show that people that live in denser housing developments tend to take more transit and walk more. It's sort of like the virtue of densifying an urban environment creates more people that use transit, which helps support transit, which makes transit better, and it becomes kind of a virtuous circle. And I think that's what we're trending towards, and trying to achieve. You know, and the opportunity for people who need a car is still going to be there to park it. You know, I think the ideas about studying the bikes and auto traffic and all that it's a good one. Our active transportation element is woefully out of date from 2012, and in my opinion, desperately needs updating. It would update some of these elements, the transportation element in particular. So in general, I think, I think reducing parking requirements is a good thing. I think it tends to help create a better urban environment with less cars overall, and then better preconditions for a better transit and pedestrian and bicycle environment. So it's kind of my thinking and how I approach this. So, having said that, I'm in favor of these reductions. I'm in favor of 0.5 max in line with the potential A-bag policies. So I'll leave it at that for the moment, and others have comments.
Okay. I'll just add really quickly to my comments that I don't believe we've built the infrastructure for other modes well enough yet. We've made the investment in automobile or motor vehicle infrastructure to the detriment of transit and active transportation infrastructure, and so we do have to catch up in those areas. Certainly, we actually are doing well as a city by having BART close by and having a couple bus lines here, but it could be even better in other places in the world. It's a lot better for both active transportation and transit. So, any other general comments, questions? Okay.
Just to add one thing, like it is becoming, more strategic rather than, providing like parking blanketly. We are directing development towards the transit-rich areas like BART and bus service, and the reduction of our exclusion of minimum parking requirement is primarily in that area. Like areas away from the public transit would not have any restrictions on the parking provision in terms of like minimum. There would not be any restriction on providing parking. There could still be parking provided for single-family zones which are away from the public transit concentrations.
Okay. So let's then go ahead and move on to the line items. I just have one comment on the line items. I think I am good with all of these, but in the middle one, multifamily housing, I do wonder if the commissioners want to consider the maximum of 0.5 everywhere and not just within a half a mile of BART to make it consistent throughout the whole city and rather than measure the distance from BART. Otherwise, either way, my vote would be yes on all of these. I'm sorry, I kind of jumped in and gave my straw poll vote maybe too soon, but let's take them one at a time as staff requested us to do. So, single family, minimum 2, maximum, the proposal is for minimum 0, maximum of 2. With also, as staff notes in the staff report, the already existing ordinance that we can only have 16 feet of paved surface for parking in the front setback, and parking is not allowed elsewhere in the front setback. So that'll prevent a front setback being filled with cars, but it could be parked with up to 2 cars. Anyone opposed to the potential amendments for single family, or any comments at all?
I support the minimum. The maximum of 2, I could see why. It sort of depends. I mean, everybody's parking in their non-legal parking spaces now, so, I guess that doesn't prevent that going forward either, does it? I guess that would be a question. I mean, in their driveway, basically, which is...
We're not, the city doesn't write tickets for people who park in their driveway.
No, but it's common practice, and it is a de facto parking space. And
Yes.
that would still be kind of, allowed or,
That could be the
Done.
third space in a sense,
Yeah.
functionally a third space.
yeah. So there is some flexibility in that sense, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And, if people did have a longer driveway, they can certainly park their cars in their long driveway.
Well, I think this is the point. If we say that you can have no more than 2 parking spaces, then you don't get the long driveway. So the traditional garage in the back corner with a 60 or 70-foot driveway, that would be 4 off-street parking spaces. Is that, yeah, probably legally 4 off-street parking spaces. Is that, how would we handle that, I guess would be my question. If the maximum is 2 and we see a driveway that can accommodate 4, do we force the garage closer to the front?
I don't know. I'm not opposed to garages in the back, per se. I mean,
And it would be just a driveway, just like, we currently have. Like, even if the garage is like far back and there is a driveway all the way, let's say 80 feet long driveway, we don't, force them to pull the garage to the front, right? And so.
Circulation, effectively.
Exactly. Effectively, it's just a driveway. And so if someone wants to park like 4 cars there, they can.
Well, I think the crux of the issue is it becomes an enforcement issue that's very difficult to enforce because you can move a car, which is always hard to cite someone for like parking in their front setback or things like that in the same vein. But, I don't think it's going to change
Exactly.
like the
That's what
requirement.
I also asked in the last meeting, like how you enforce these things. In single family is kind of really, tricky. And enforcement is, difficult without any mechanism, and we don't have that.
Yeah.
And that's why I was saying it's very difficult to enforce uncovered parking requirements because cars move. Unless they're out of service vehicles, it's much easier to regulate like conditioned spaces because it's built into the building, but driveway spaces are just almost nearly impossible to enforce on.
And I don't think these amendments are going to change the current situation.
but-
It's not like people are going to see these amendments and say, oh, I'm going to park up my driveway now.
I also don't think we see, and maybe Jeff corrects us if I'm wrong, but I don't feel like we're seeing too many net new rear garages being proposed. It tends to be more of a historic built context than a new context that's being created. So I feel like it's also like an existing non-complying situation that, you're kind of grandfathered in if you've got an old garage in the back corner.
I also thought the same thing, like in the last meeting, I thought maybe maximum is not required because looking at the current trend, we typically, have requests for exceptions than, additions. Like typically people have 2 existing, parking spaces and they want to convert one of the parking space into something else and they come to us with exception. Or when they have an, ADU or an extension which triggers an additional parking space and they come to us for an exception. So the trend is like, people don't want too many car parking spaces on their properties. And so that, having some maximum would be useful, whether we enforce that in some way in future or not.
So I wasn't sure after your comments whether you're in favor of the single family.
well, I am, but I guess it's the nuances of how, if somebody wanted to build a 2-car garage in the back of their lot, assuming they had the space to do it, I think that's fine.
Wouldn't that require like a conditional use or a variance to build a garage structure in the rear yard?
Maybe, yeah, 20 foot in the back, yeah, so.
Sorry, a variance because?
Well, I
Or
guess,
a-
we have such small lots, it's not
Building
going
in
to
the rear
happen
yard.
very often, but I guess,
Oh,
20 feet minimum is the rear yard requirement from lot boundary,
okay.
rear lot boundary, so they can go back to.
I see. So a lot of these homes that are built with that garage in the corner,
They're
they wouldn't be
grandfathered.
built that way now. Okay.
non-conforming.
Mm-hmm.
So new uses that come up that wouldn't be done, but
Yeah.
I guess my problem is if people want to park in their driveway and it goes back further, that's okay. I mean, it's not a great use of yard space as far as I'm concerned, or open space, but I guess I think what I was originally concerned about with this was also just multiple cars, like 4 cars in the front yard or something, and that's what I want to
Right,
avoid.
but how many properties are there in Albany with such a wide frontage? Like, most of the properties are 37.5, feet wide. And,
Well, I know,
lot are
yeah.
25 feet, and in that, if you take out,
Well, you don't have curb cuts, but then, people have been proposing driving sideways and parking sort of sideways in front of their house, and I don't know, I just never was
Well,
a fan of that, but.
That is already existing ordinance, that they have to have the 16 feet, so you could
Yeah.
bring it up with the city if someone,
Yeah.
if you were a neighbor that objected to that.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll just let it go and say I'm in favor of this ordinance.
Okay.
That line, single family.
So, and then I'm also in favor of the single family. Did you want to register a vote on the single family
I
requirements?
just want to be clear that when people are wanting to build on a property, that they have the choice to do what they want. They're not required to put a space, right?
Right.
But there
Correct.
is a limit on how many they can put. That's
Yes.
it.
That's
And
correct.
so in the driveway story that we were talking about, I think you should have the freedom to use your property the way you want, as long as it's on your property, as long as it's not 4 cars in the front. I think that, I would prefer that we go in that direction, but this is fine, as long as people have flexibility. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I just can't think, and I can't think of it ever happening that someone is going to use a piece of land, a piece of residential land in Albany to park a lot of cars. People recognize the value of the land and will be using it for housing rather than parking cars. Okay, so I think we have agreement on single family and duplexes. The recommendation is the same for single family. Are there any, do we have all yay votes on that as well? Okay, I see a yes.
Well, I
Okay.
would say more closer to 1 space per unit.
Okay,
I'm assuming these are not going to be really
the
big
maximum.
spaces either, so, you're allowing 4 spaces per lot in this. So I would,
oh, that's
I
true.
would move it back towards, my preference would be to go towards 1 space per unit,
Okay,
because I'm imagining space is already going to be kind of tight on a duplex for the most part. And
okay. Any comments from other commissioners?
I
Two
just,
or one?
no, I just have one question regarding the first item, single family. If some property uses SB 9 and divides the lot into 2, then, and thus minimum required, lot size is really small. In that case, would we still allow maximum 2 parking spaces?
Theoretically, yes. Whether it really works in Albany would be a tight fit, but if you had a 5,000 square foot lot and you do an SB2 split, then
Okay, so
you've got
basically-
2 different lots, and you can then, I'm not super familiar with SB9. I could check. I've got access to a reference here to see if there was a limit in the law of the number of parking spaces. Off the top of my head, I didn't focus in on it.
But then that would become, if there's two houses on that same lot,
Right,
it
so
would be 2
like
lots.
a small 2,500 square feet, lot or something
Yeah.
like that.
Right.
As long, but there are like, also requirements, not requirement, but like, the SB 9 allows, I think, even like 1,000 square feet lot or something. I'm not 100% sure, but I remember reading that. And so, it depends like how many, small lots are feasible. And, but with that also, like, there would not be space for parking then. So they may not
Right.
go for 2 parking spaces. So maybe, that may not be that consequential.
Yeah, I'm thinking that might just fall also into the category of something that's just it's not feasible, not practical, it's not going to happen, and we might not have to worry about
Right.
going in the weeds about that.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so that's, so going back to duplexes, we have the proposal for 0 minimum, 2 maximum, and Commissioner McLeod is offering up maybe one maximum?
Yes.
I agree with that. I actually misread that. I thought two per lot.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And Commissioner Wadi?
I can go either way. So if there's a majority for one, I'm fine with that. I was sort of teetering between 1 and 2, so.
Okay. Well, I think I would be in favor of the one now that you've brought that up as well, so.
Maybe if I could propose a suggestion is on that, and I don't know if this is already built in, but for all of these, like, is there any discretionary process that one could seek? Or is the maximum truly like, it's an objective standard and there is no discretionary path for more?
Good question.
We could build in a use permit process that brings it to the commission for some of those cases, and we could craft, findings that would be appropriate for that.
I mean, I would be supportive of that, sort of thinking through all of them. But, I think there could be something around unique lot situation, proximity to transit. There may be the occasional location where it just happens to be that sweet spot that's not terribly close to any, the farthest point from any transit in Albany. And/or depending on the bedroom count, because I do think there is now, most of the time when we're thinking about duplexes, like the ones that come to mind to me are on some of the ones on like Washington and Portland, where they're, pretty small homes that are probably hovering around 1,000 square feet, if that, 2-bedroom types. But someone could maybe build a duplex that is a 4-bedroom duplex, and I can understand that there might be a greater parking demand that, could be logical. So I just also don't want to, I want to not be so stringent that we don't allow any flexibility, but we kind of set our policy expectation, and that becomes very much the exception to the rule and not the rule. But I don't know.
Wasn't in the previous meeting, the red line draft you had presented, that had some language about exceptions,
Yeah,
but I'm not sure if that was limited to just multifamily or it was for, general parking.
I'm not recalling exactly the details of that, but if it is in there, great, and I'm just not remembering it. But if not, we'd essentially bring back the parking exception process we have today, but we're flipping it. Instead of, today we have an exception to allow less parking than required, and now we could flip that around and say you need an exception for more parking than required.
Yeah, I'm just looking at, it was page 7 of the red-lined document, and it says exceptions for parking space. They can go through a major use permit process and approve. The P&Z can approve more parking spaces in excess of the maximum
And that,
with conditions,
that doesn't limit that to any development type. It's for
I
general.
think it would,
Yeah.
yeah, I think we should have an appeal or some sort of process for
Yeah.
discretionary approvals, because, there
Yeah.
certainly could be
Totally, yeah.
uses that would be more appropriate.
I would be in favor of that as well. Commissioner Hudson?
On my street, there's some duplexes. They look like 2 single-family homes joined together. Same number of people in each as a single-family home. Maybe the street length is shorter, but other than that, they're the same. I feel it's almost a penalty to say 1 rather than 2, simply because of the structure of the 2 units joined together. That's-
Well, in terms of the straw poll, sounds like then we have 3 in favor of the 1, of changing it to 1 who could go either way, and then 1 who'd like to keep it at 2.
And then I think 1 with provision for exception, right?
Yeah, and
Major use permit or something.
it seems like there is consensus that having the process for granting an exception is also desired by all. Yeah, yeah, getting nods from everyone. So that's a 5-0, but it sounds like it's more of a solid 3 on the duplexes for 1 space per unit.
I'm supportive of the one with the conditional use allowance.
So then we have 4. The straw poll would be at 4 in favor of the 1 instead of 2. Did we confuse you, or were you?
No, this
Okay.
is helping. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you. Moving on to multifamily, I had proposed that we think about this one a little bit, but let me open it to the other commissioners. Comments on this one? The minimum 0, maximum 0.5 within a half-mile in BART and 1 space per unit elsewhere.
I support as proposed. I think, making it 0.5 citywide would, create more opportunities for like exceptions. Like typical, like we, currently, not currently, but previously we used to, have exceptions for reduction. Now we will, do the same kind of process for increase, and particularly for multifamily, So.
So you're saying you prefer it as written here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
0.5, and that also, complies with the TOC requirements.
Okay.
Yep.
Commissioner Hudson?
There's a term unbundling that we talked about before, and I think like incentivizing multifamily housing, high rises, where people who don't want to have a car and don't want to have to pay rent for having a space could be a nice combination for encouraging, as we've talked about, getting people away from cars and more towards public transportation. That's my only comment.
Okay, thank you. Would you be in favor of this as written then, or no?
I'm in favor of that.
Okay. So we have 2 in favor as written. Commissioner McLeod?
Yeah, I would be in favor of the amendment as written.
As written, okay.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I would actually, no, I'd be in favor of extending that citywide.
Okay. Okay, one
Yeah.
for the citywide.
Yeah.
2 for as written.
Because again, we're going to have projects not very far from each other that would be subject to different rules. And I think, practically speaking, you can get to BART pretty easily from anywhere in the city.
Okay. Okay, 2 for as written, and then I'll put my vote in for the 0.5 everywhere. And Commissioner Waddy, you might be the tiebreaker.
I am good with it as proposed.
As proposed, okay. So leave it as proposed, 3-2. Any other discussion about multifamily? If not, moving on to TDM. And instead of only a transit pass per unit required for the San Pablo Avenue specific plan area, we are going, the proposal is to make it a citywide requirement. Any comments?
That would be great, just hopefully it won't break the bank for AC Transit, so.
Well, this would be the developer paying for the pass, I believe. Yeah.
Right.
And so AC Transit would get the funds. Yeah. And anyone else? Sounds like,
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. And then I would also propose that we, do another review of the transportation demand management program in general and see about making it a little more robust and a little more effective. So that would be a future
Yeah.
work item, future
I think it was that.
plan item perhaps, or,
Looking through last meeting's minutes, I think that was entered into the minutes as
Yeah.
well,
Right.
too. Yeah.
So we have a lot of other alternate modes, including bike, but also, car share and
right, there are a
hail
lot of
rides
other.
and all that. So we need infrastructure for that.
Okay. I think we can move on from this one. Sounds like we're all in consensus that this is good. And the unbundling is the last one, the requirement for unbundling citywide rather than just in the San Pablo Avenue specific plan area. Okay, I'm seeing
I
some
think
head
that makes
nods.
sense, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
all right. Commissioner Wadi, nod as well? Okay. Okay. Unanimous on that one. Good. I think we've gone through your straw poll process.
That's terrific, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
You'll see this in ordinance form, I don't know exactly when, but it will be as quickly as we can get it packaged together and get a public notice out so you can take action on it. It'll probably be one of your June meetings, I would hope.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you for making sure that you were clear on this. Great, so that moves us to item 8, which is the new business. That's the only other business we have, which is the Community Developer Director Report. So, Director, go ahead.
Let me, bear with me a moment as I pull up my notes.
And were you here to speak on any item, or?
I'm the owner of 626, and after everything, I just wanted to listen to the rest of the meeting.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. I just want to make sure that you understood that we had passed by all the other items, so, yeah. Okay, very good, thank you. Go ahead, Director.
Okay, so, a couple things I want to bring you up to date on. First of all, we're very close to having a planning manager recruitment completed. Nothing to announce quite yet, but we do have a tentative offer out to someone, and conditional offer, I should say. And so, hopefully we'll be rebuilding the capacity of the organization a little bit here in the coming months. We have had the benefit of Sophie Gable, who's been doing some work behind the scenes, doing a lot of the staff reports and analysis that you've seen in recent months. She's finished her first year of grad school just yesterday, and will be working with us for a couple of months this summer full-time. So there'll be a couple of things that she'll be working on in particular, and I'm sure she'll be coming to a meeting or two, so you'll have an opportunity to meet her in person. So that's kind of what our summer is shaping up to look like. I think for the coming next meeting, in the first meeting in, the second meeting in May, we'll have at least 2 parklets for you. Final approval of 2 of the parklets on Solano Avenue. I'm not sure about how many design review applications. We are seeing a bit of a slowdown. We do have an interesting application on Adams. It's a three-unit project on Adams. It's within the footprint of the specific plan, but it's also in the R3 zoning district. And thinking that that might be a good project to have a study session on. It's a little different than what we normally see, and it'd probably be helpful to the architect to have that as well. So I'm not exactly sure when that is going to land, but that'll be something a little bit different. There are a couple of more applications, standard design review applications that are floating around out there. I'm not sure that we're going to have them for the next meeting. They would need to be kind of tidied up in the next couple of days, which I kind of doubt. In terms of the housing element, we have had some discussions with the State Housing and Community Development Department on edits. It's taken a little bit longer than we would have liked to have those discussions and get some background information from them about what they're looking for. So nothing imminent is going to come out of that. I think we'll probably be able to give you an update on exactly what revisions we think we need to make in one of your June meetings, is my guess, I hope. The same goes with the local hazard mitigation plan. You looked at that a month or 2 ago. We have consulted with the California Office of Emergency Services, and they have a lot of comments too. It's all good, but it's just more detail here, more detail there than we expected. So we're grinding through that and hope to bring that back to you, but it's not quite on the schedule that we had hoped that we outlined for you when we were first here. The project at 540 San Pablo Avenue, the bowling alley site, it looks like, well, it's a complicated project in part because the storm drain culvert that runs underneath the property can only really be constructed in the dry, well, it has to be constructed during the dry season. Given current economic and particularly financial banking situation, the ability for them to secure construction financing this spring has been suddenly and pretty severely changed for them. So it's likely that it will be postponed to next spring at least. And that, of course, depends on larger macroeconomic trends, interest rates and rents and so on and so forth. But we're very close to having a building permit ready for that project, but unfortunately, that's the reality of the banking world right now, is the industry is kind of in upheaval, and they're simply not, for their particular bank, they're not writing construction loans. This is kind of last minute notice, but there is a kind of a sort of it's a groundbreaking tomorrow, even though the ground has already been broken, for the Saha Affordable Housing Development Project at Cleveland, Washington. And it's open to the public, that the project developer is going to be there and have some kind of shovel in the ground at Pierce Street Park overlooking the site. If you haven't been out there, they actually did start construction in December, and then we had all this rain, so it's still a lot of grading and below grade infrastructure work going on right now. Not much to look at, but that is going on. Otherwise, the project is going fine. There's no new surprises there other than the impact of the rain. And
That's at 10:30.
it starts at 10:30. That's right. And then lastly, we are envisioning doing some ordinance revisions. I think I mentioned our ADU ordinance is one that you don't see a lot, but we're using a lot. We still get a lot of applications for ADUs in the city. And what we have on the books doesn't match up with state law now, and it gets very confusing for all of us because we're really looking at both our parts of our code, but other parts of it are crossed out. And then we're looking at state law. It's not very user-friendly. So that's a pretty high priority for us, and to get that back to you. I think we mentioned it in a recent meeting that there will be some policy decisions that you could weigh in on, even though you don't get to see the actual applications because of state law. So that's kind of my report of what's going on in the Community Development Department and in the planning world. Be happy to answer any questions or any feedback that you might have.
Any questions from commissioners? Go ahead.
What is the status of our work plan? Are we doing
The city council just recently adopted a strategic plan, and I haven't gotten any direction I don't think the council has given any direction to the city manager, and the city manager hasn't given any direction to me or the other staff members who support commissions and committees, so nothing imminent on that. We're continuing to plug away, obviously, on things that either you've indicated are important or just are obviously something that we have to get done, something like the housing element or the local hazard mitigation plan. I'm always open to hearing your feedback about what to work on or what's a priority, what's not a priority, with or without a work plan. I welcome that. I could, if you wish, at the future meeting, put the City Council's strategic plan on your agenda as an information item, just so you're familiar with it, if that's helpful.
I think that would be a good thing. Okay, any other questions of staff on this item? I have none. Let's make sure to give the public an opportunity to weigh in. Any members of the public wish to speak on this item? Anyone raising their hands on Zoom?
I don't see anyone on Zoom. If anyone on Zoom wants to address the commission, please use the raise your hand function. I'm not seeing any.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Let's close that out, and that's our last item of business then. And I'll note our next meeting is in 2 weeks, May 24th. And if there's nothing else, we can be adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.